So I think we have. I think we've got people are still trickling in, but I think we might as well get started. I'm pleased to introduce to you Professor Yuri Gorby. He's a professor of microbiology, subsurface microbiology, and electromicrobiology at Rensselaer Polytech Institute. I had heard about Yuri. Apparently, Yuri visited this campus before I came here and hasn't been back here since. So he knows Marilyn Fogel very well, and he was also a very good friend and close collaborator of James Scott. So James would come and tell me he was going out to Washington to work with Yuri in this amazing cultural lab associated with the Pacific Northwest Laboratory. The reason I asked Yuri to come and give the talk today, which is not about his primary research focus, which is super, super cool stuff. And if you're wondering why pinhole leaks occur in your copper piping, or as he was describing, microbes boring through stainless steel, he and his group of people talked to. But we had, when James passed away, we had a gathering at the AGU to celebrate James. And so a bunch of us gave talks about how, so all science talks. And Yuri stood up, and we all expected him to talk about nanowires, bacterial nanowires, and bacterial corrosion, all that. And instead he talked about fracking. And none of us knew that he was working on this at that time, and none of us knew anything about fracking other than we heard the word. We understood that it could lead to earthquakes and earthquake swarms, but beyond that we hadn't seen anything. So in a short 12-minute talk, we were all blown away. And at that moment I said, I've got to get Yuri here to give us the larger version of this, because I think you'll find that, like me, you really don't know anything about fracking. If you haven't been to see it, you really don't know what's going on. So that's as much an introduction I think you could give. So Yuri, take it away.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to try this lighting.
All right.
How's that?
I'm going to try this. Everybody hear me? Yeah. Well, George, thank you so much for having me here. It is a pleasure to be back at Carnegie after, I don't know, it's like 35 years or something. It's insane. These are one of those talks where I hope that you guys, if you have anything to say, I hope you didn't come to see it like a science talk, for one thing. This is more raising public awareness. So those of you that are not scientists or have had enough of the scientists around you, this is going to be more about public awareness. And I have to say that, this is something that came on my awareness of hydraulic fracturing really only started about in 2010. And this was, I was part of the U.S. Department of Energy. Actually, I should give you a little bit of background. Let's start with that. Okay, so let's start this over again. So what happened? I prepared this talk this morning because the computer that I was working on at home, I grabbed the wrong one. So I didn't have a lot of time to practice this one. But let's talk about this. So this is what I'm going to go over today. Fracking 101. If you've never heard, how many people have heard of hydraulic fracturing? Yeah, so you've all heard about it now, and that's great. Were you introduced to it by like Gasland? Was that the first time you had heard about it? Is anybody familiar with that movie?
Heard of it.
Gasland by Josh Fox. So that wasn't where you first heard of this. Well, that's interesting, and so is this telephone. Okay. So I'm really surprised to hear that, because Josh did help to introduce fracking into our lexicon with a movie called Gasland, and he followed it up with Gasland 2. I have to say there wasn't a lot of science in the first one. It was more, look at what's going on here, getting a reaction, and he did get a reaction by a lot of people, including me. And I take a little closer look at it, because I had been working for the U.S. Department of Energy for about 15 years at the Hanford Nuclear Reservation. And there we were working on subsurface science research. A lot of our research was focused on fate and transport of contaminants in the groundwater. We had the subsurface science research program. We had NABIR, Natural and Accelerated Bioremediation programs. All of these research programs that were focused on things like uranium and chromium transport. But that core group of scientists out there, probably the 200 or 300 scientists that were involved in that, not only in the United States, but we had international collaborators. When I went to one of the PI meetings, I think it was in 2011 in DC, I asked that question. How many of you, here's 300 scientists, all subsurface science research folks, how many of you have heard of hydraulic fracturing? And three people raised their hand. And I was like blown away. I was like, you know, hold on a second. You guys are sitting there suffering from the same lack of funding that I'm suffering from. Why aren't we involved in this? And I proceeded to describe that this is something that, from my years with the U.S. Department of Energy, I had never seen anything quite this magnitude of environmental devastation and challenges. So what we're going to go over today is like, what is high volume? And it should be slick water hydraulic fracturing. How does it differ from conventional fracturing? And we're going to go through the industrial processes, the infrastructure that's necessary. We're going to talk about the human and environmental health impacts, and then are there any alternatives? So now we'll do a little bit of background. So I'm from West Virginia. West Virginia is a history of energy production. We had coal, gas, oil. And it is now the heart of the extraction from the Marcellus Shale is going on in my home state of West Virginia. And I'm also a bioprocess engineer, but you can see this is our, what do we call this, the West Virginia reactor, I guess. It's but I did love growing up around fermentation processes. It actually allowed me to go out to the University of New Hampshire to get my PhD in microbiology, and then I discovered actually that some organisms can use uranium as electron acceptor, and that got me a postdoctoral fellowship at the U.S. Geological Survey, and then I went to the Hanford Nuclear Reservation to study uranium reduction, enzymatic uranium reduction by bacteria. And believe it or not, this little 4-eared rabbit, and I swear to you, lived outside of my building, the 331 building on the Hanford Nuclear Reservation. We also had albino crows, snakes with legs, crazy stuff, no kidding. So, but at that 15 years out there, that's when I really became part of this research team. That is probably, from my perspective right now, would have been one of the best teams to actually address the issues that's facing the environment from high volume hydraulic fracturing and all the related industrial activities. And then I moved down to the J. Craig Venter Institute down in San Diego, and I stayed there for about 5 or 6 years, and then it didn't work out so well. No, it's my best friend out there. Yeah, that's Yuri. And so but it was down at the Venter Institute that I actually heard about hydraulic fracturing, and it was during a talk at Duquesne University that my friend and colleague, John Stoltz, introduced me to this. He said, "Yuri, have you ever heard of this?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Come on, you're going to go for a drive with me." So we started driving out from Pittsburgh out toward Bethany, West Virginia, where I'm from. And he started showing me the infrastructure. I started seeing first the trucks, and then the pipelines that were stored along every warehouse, everything. And the trucks hauling liquids, sand, waste. And we went out to my first frac pad, and my eyes just like blew up. I was like, what's going on here? And then I became aware of what was really happening. I mean, this was a full-scale assault on the area that I lived. In fact, my own college, Bethany College, in my hometown of Bethany, West Virginia, leased to Chesapeake Energy, and they have put a well that's about 1,600 feet uphill from student housing. Now, that well has been operating without incident so far, but as you'll see as we go through this, I'm going to show you where you actually, these large wells have problems as they age and are re-stimulated. You'll hear about refracking, so the re-stimulation of these wells. So, that's a little bit about me. I do want to make it I am a legitimate scientist, or at least I was. And I did discover, along with my colleagues at the Geological Survey, that some bacteria can not only use iron as an electron acceptor, so I didn't actually discover this one. These organisms, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with the dissimilatory iron reduction that can transform things like hydrospheric oxide into magnetite, if the geochemistry is correct. It's been implicated that these organisms are, those magnetite deposits can help you actually map out oil and coal deposits because they form around the fringes of it. And we demonstrated also that these same group of bacteria the dissimilatory iron-reducing bacteria, could also use uranium-6 as an electron acceptor, breathe uranium, so that's enzymatically reduced uranium from uranium-6 that forms a nice uranyl carbonate complex in typical groundwater conditions, and then give these organisms an appropriate electron donor. They can breathe uranium, the soluble form, reduce it to uranium-4, and that precipitates out as uranium oxide mineral phase, uraninite, or some mixed valence uranium minerals. The other thing, yeah, George, thanks for bringing this up. That this is an image of the other science that I do, and these are bacterial nanowires, and it's a lot of really cool research going on by a number of labs now across the country and the world on extracellular electron transfer reactions. So all of these little filaments that you see from one bacterium to another are electrically conductive filaments. They're actually serve as semiconductors. There may be implications for charge transfer and communication in here. In fact, we're starting to now look at these types of communities as microbiological neural networks. So there's a lot of TTL activity going on in that image that will blow your mind if you're into that kind of stuff. But what I wanted to really talk about today is that these same groups of organisms not only just transform these little like hydrospheric oxide into magnetite and uranyl ion into uranium oxides that precipitate, but they do it along those little filaments that we see. So we can actually, these organisms then can reach out and find electron acceptors, something to breathe at some distance away, and then transform it, in this case from hydrospheric oxide into magnetite particles, and you can see these linear arrays and then the little filament here that extends out. Oh, I have a pointer, let me do it. And also here, these are linear arrays that are now, by scanning electron microscopy, the contrast that you see here are these nanoparticulate uraninite particles that have this nice lattice, well, the spacings that you can see by diffraction. But those same organisms, there's some evidence that these same organisms are responsible for the reduction and precipitation of things like uranium, the formation of uranium ore, for these types of formations like uranium roll-front deposits, and also in reduction spots. And so I won't go into the details here, but these organisms are believed to be the organisms that reduced and precipitated uranium, and actually not only uranium, but there's a little vanadium spot right in the center of that. So this is uranium here. This is a red bed, so this is iron. The iron here has been reduced and mineralized away from the site, and right in the center you have a little spot that's highly concentrated in uranium and vanadium, reduced forms. Vanadium has very similar chemistry to uranium. So why am I talking about this if we were going to talk about fracking? Well, one of the things that happens is that this same, the shale deposits that are out there, especially the Marcellus Shale, is actually highly enriched in uranium. The oceans around that time, I think the Marcellus Shale was 350 million years, is that right? You guys would know more about that than I do, but in the years prior to the formation of the Marcellus Shale, oxidized uranium was dissolved in water. It was freely available for organisms. When there was a lot of started that deposition of biomass, the organisms then could first of all use up any oxygen that was around. So that was the first electron acceptor. Then they would go to nitrate and sulfate. Once they got down to the bottom there, then they would have uranium as electron acceptor. And so what we have now in these really deep shale formations is not only just an area that's enriched in gas and oil, and that is trapped within these formations, but it's highly enriched in uranium. And uranium then becomes one of those issues. I mean, if we're going to drill into the system, what do we do with the drill cuttings? We have to remember that this bit that they use is a 7 7/8 inch bit, my driller friend tells me. And so if you just think about going out a half mile or even up to a mile laterally, that is a massive amount of drill cuttings. And currently those drill cuttings are being taken to landfills. In West Virginia, basically all landfills, municipal landfills now, are accepting drill cutting waste, and these are up in hollows that used to be freely accessible. You could take your garbage can and dump it there, maybe find an old lawnmower or something. But now they have security at the end of the hollows, and you can't get up in there because this is no longer just a municipal landfill. This is a hazardous waste site that in the Department of Energy, we would classify this stuff as low-level mixed radioactive material. I mean, it would be, you know, we would handle this in a laboratory with great care. 100 grams of this stuff sitting unlabeled on our bench would shut down the facility. But these guys that are driving a truck down there, they are hauling hundreds of thousands of tons of this stuff and distributing it pretty broadly right now. One of the areas besides West Virginia landfills, this is being taken up in the northeastern portion of Pennsylvania. It's being taken up into New York and deposited in landfills up there. Hundreds of thousands of tons. And from what I could see in my experience in the Department of Energy, the way that they handle that is absolutely absurd and quite dangerous. So here's your introduction. Hydrofracking 101. Now, how do I get to that little thing? I think I can. Oh, yes, here we go. So this is a link to just something that's online. If you really want to have some fun, go and look at this. Now, I'm going to try to keep up with this as we go through. I wanted to show you, like, you guys work in subsurface science stuff, right? How many geologists are here? You ever see anything that looks like this? I mean, especially in West Virginia. I mean, there's a couple of vacancies typically. If you drill down through anywhere in West Virginia, you're going to hit a hole somewhere. And I'm going to show you that you don't get this nice layer cake pattern. You get huge vacancies in there, and that becomes important. But let's run this little link, and we'll get caught up to speed on what high volume hydraulic fracturing is. And I'll do a short one here. Where's that short one? Yeah, that's a short one. Okay, I think it's going to play.
Hydraulic fracturing is a time-tested, proven technology. It's been used in more than 1 million wells worldwide for the past 6 decades.
I'm going to stop right there. 6 decades. We hear that a lot. Or 7. Yes, hydraulic fracturing has been around 70 years or more. It's something that I think his name was George Mitchell invented down in Texas. And it is a spectacular type of geotechnical engineering feat. However, high volume hydraulic fracturing, the stuff that really came online in 2005 when we had the Energy Policy Act, that gave exclusive exemptions of this technology, high volume slickwater hydraulic fracturing, and all related industrial activities. Exemption from the Clean Air Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act, RCRA, CERCLA, the Right to Know Act. That's why we don't know what the fluids are being used in here, because it's actually protected by these exemptions. So this is not the same technology. And in fact, because it's not the same technology, that's the primary reason why it was excluded from New York State or banned from New York State. It isn't 70-year-old technology. I compare it to like a Bic lighter and a flamethrower. So you can light a birthday cake with one, and you can incinerate the house with the other. And so it is absolutely different. So when you do look at all of these things online, please take care, read between the lines or listen between the lines, and just listen how ridiculous this type of propaganda really can be. Here we go.
This is how it works. First, once the necessary infrastructure is in place, a drilling rig is assembled and inspected in accordance with the required safety and environmental standards.
Okay, hold on a second. The right infrastructure in place. I don't know how many trucks. You just imagine how many trucks it takes to get a drill rig out there like that. And how many trucks. It's about 800 to 1,000 trucks just for the fluids that they're going to inject down into that hole. 800 trucks for one frac job.
On little two-lane roads.
On little two-lane roads in West Virginia, where school buses get hit, pushed off the road. In Clarksburg, West Virginia, one of the waste trucks going past there lost itself, mostly because these drivers are overworked and they're also impacted by the chemicals that they're hauling. And I know that because I'm friends with drivers that have been basically disabled from their activities. And in Clarksburg, West Virginia, the most tragic thing that I had in the hometown of a friend of mine was that a mother and her 2 kids were in the back seat, and the mother was driving, and one of these waste trucks came around too fast and dumped over and crushed the back end of their car. And the mother looked around and her kids were gone. So, and if I do get emotional in these things, I'm sorry. I'm actually being, treated a little for PTSD, because when you go down, has anybody been to a frac field? Like, anybody friends over in West Virginia or anywhere that you've seen some of this stuff? If you're interested in going on a tour, really after this, anytime, just give me a call and I'll take you down. It'll be well worth it if you really want to know what's going on. I've offered that to a number of people, and it's always the industry people that turn me down.
Once we are satisfied that all the required standards have been met, can drilling begin. When the well is drilled, multiple layers of cement and steel casing are inserted to create an impermeable barrier between the well and the groundwater.
Let me tell you something here. When that bore, when that bit is going through saturated groundwater, they typically use air drilling to get down in there. And air drilling, they have to use some sort of soap, they call it. These are actually plasticizers that are pushed out into the formation, and that allows you to force air down in there, and then your bits come, all the cuttings will come back up. Otherwise, all that pressure can go out into the formation, you lose a lot of pressure. And so these fluids that they use, and again, this so-called soap, you can look them up. One of them, Airfoam HB, I think, is one of them that they use. These are plasticizers, and they're very strong endocrine disrupting compounds within those mixtures. I have a friend from down in, I think it's Jane Lou, West Virginia. Not a friend, one of an acquaintance that I met through this. He's a well tender, 6'8", 270 pounds, and he hauls this fluids around and he dumps them on the outside of the well. What you're going to see is that they're going to talk a lot about well casing integrity. Because you don't want, when that gas is coming up there, you don't want to lose that gas out there, because you'll not only lose product, you'll contaminate the groundwater. But most of the leaks don't occur through this way. They come up through the side here, and if you want to see some great articles, look up Professor Tony Ingraffia's work, and I have links actually at the end of this where you can find all of this information, so you don't have to write it all down. But the leaks, the migration of rogue gases comes up on the outside. Consider, well, you're going to see how, I'm going to reposition this thing, how big this well really is. And I'll try not to interrupt anymore.
The well is drilled vertically until it nears the shale zone. Just prior to the shale zone, the well turns and horizontal drilling begins. The Empire State Building extends 1,453 feet from base to tip. The depth of a well can be over 8 Empire State Buildings. After another cement casing is put...
The total depth, I think the deepest total depth well, that's the vertical and the lateral legs, is something like 20,000 feet now. So it's remarkable, absolutely remarkable. And again, one thing to point out here is that these bits, it looks beautiful, but these bits kind of wander up and down, as they're going through the formation. And my driller friend, he's up on this, in the control room, and he is feeling this stuff, is what he tells me. That he can feel the torque that's generated when that bumps up onto another formation, the bit starts working funny. And so he can direct it downward, and it's going like this. And so you don't really have a perfect hole. You have something, a 7 7/8 inch bit will make a 12-inch hole as it's going through the system. And lots of different variables, and you'll have low spots, and when that happens, when you see the cement that they put around in here, you'll see that it is nearly impossible to get a perfect seal.
To ensure maximum system integrity, a perforating device is inserted to create small holes in the casing and the rock. Then, fluids comprised predominantly of water and sand are pumped down into the well bore, creating tiny hairline fractures.
Predominantly water and sand. Now, if you have 0.5% of cyanide in your water, or arsenic in your water, it's not something that you really think is great, right? 0.5%. But, and then if you consider the volumes that we're working with, it's somewhere between 5 and 15 million gallons of fluid that are being put down in this hole. that even a couple of percent is massive amounts. And we'll look at the yeah.
The fluids were all proprietary and classified, so we don't know what's in them, or do we not know?
Okay, so the question was, the fluids, are they proprietary? Do we know what's in them? We have kind of a list. There's a list of about 760 chemicals that Henry Waxman had a congressional hearing on this. I think it was in 2012. I'm not sure about the date. But they were to be provided the list of all the things they included things like walnut shells in there and old stuff that was used to use. And buried in there are things like glutaraldehyde, formaldehyde. Those are biocides that are used to stop the activity of the sulfate-reducing bacteria that exist in these formations or exist in the fluids, because those sulfate-reducing bacteria generate hydrogen sulfide. That sours the gas stream. It's a corrosive. That's why they use biocides. You'll hear them say, "Oh, we sterilize or we disinfect the whole, we kill all the bacteria, so you don't have to worry about bacteria." They don't have to worry about bacteria, but we have to worry about 10,000 gallons of formaldehyde, like the active ingredient in embalming fluid, going into these holes, and not just going into the holes. I'll show you what happens when they actually frack this hole. I will also note here that, they can use these perf guns and also hydraulic fracturing, but you can actually, and do it with fluids, but you can also do that with controlled ballistics. They use uranium-tipped artillery, put those into these, and you get a much more controlled fracturing. I heard a great talk on this from some fracture mechanic, and I was like, uranium? Yeah, that's great. Here we go.
But you already said that.
That's right. I did. It is a depleted uranium form or a norm, naturally occurring radioactive materials. But the ballistics that they use, that all comes up. Now the uranium that's coming up here, this stuff, is in a reduced form, and if you keep it reduced, that uranium doesn't travel so much. Unfortunately, it does degrade to things like radium, which is pretty soluble, and moves out in the fluids. So a lot of the fluids that are generated in association with these formations are actually radioactive from things like radium. Yeah. Okay. I will not say anything more about this.
It was released within the tiny hairline fractures and safely brought up the wellbore and to the surface. America has vast amounts of natural gas, which can provide a cleaner burning source of energy for more than 100 years. Technology is making it possible to safely and responsibly unlock this energy endowment.
Have you had enough psychological attacks? I mean, like safely, and this is an inherently dangerous operation. Drillers that are actually performing this, typically, most of the drillers have encountered problems. My friend, who was drilling wells, vertical wells, and his father was a driller, his grandfather was a driller. When they started turning the bit horizontally, that's when he closed down. He said, "There's no way am I going to participate in this," because he could tell how dangerous and the volume of materials and where that was going. Because he's a West Virginian, and so they bring in a lot of drillers from Texas and Oklahoma, because West Virginians, believe it or not, are a little smarter than that. So let's see. I can go back. Okay, back to the show here. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So what should we know? Because, like I said, 2010, I knew zero about this. So what should we know? Well, we should know that this is not the same technology. It is something absolutely completely different. This technology uses drilling methods that are unconventional. That's the term that's used. These are unconventional resources. The fluids that are used in drilling, for instance, and are specially designed. These drilling muds, as they call it, they have a particular composition and also a particular density. And if you move away from that, the proper density, And now let's say that these drill fluids are put down as you're drilling the hole. These drill fluids are used to suppress the gas from keeping coming back up. Now, if the density of that fluid is not right, and that gas builds up sufficient pressure, we're talking high pressure, that whole rig, the whole pad, can be blown out of the ground. And that is why these drillers and their so-called mudders work together and make sure that they don't go away from that proper mixture. And many times they do. So when you do hear about catastrophic failures, it's typically when these wells kick and explode, it's because something has happened with the fluids. These are also non-Newtonian fluids. When you apply pressure, they do act as a liquid, but when you're putting in the next piece of pipe or the next section of your drill, that drilling stops, the pressure then is reduced, and these fluids become a gel, and that gel allows these little particles to stay, the drill cuttings to stay suspended so they don't pack around your drill bit and trap this drill bit down in the ground. So these are really, and Schlumberger and Halliburton, they actually attract a lot of our students at RPI because this is just some amazing technology, but it's something that is not water. These are extremely hazardous chemicals, and like I said, you can have depths of up to 20,000 feet total depth. Now, let me show you something for comparison. So this is Rifle, Colorado. This was an area of vanadium and uranium mining, and there's some big tailings problems out here in this site. And the U.S. Department of Energy used this as one of their field sites, their field demonstration sites. And we had been out there, I think, over 10 years. And this is the site, right there. And the worry is that the uranium from this site is moving into groundwater, maybe into the surface water here. And lots, characterization of groundwater flow and, fate and transport models, reactive, non-reactive models. It's remarkable work that the U.S. Department of Energy has done. But this is a little bit like scanned out. So where's our little site? That's our site right there now. And you see these little things? These are well pads. Because this area is being hydraulically fractured like crazy. Now let me show you, and you can find all of this, by the way, on fractracker.org. This is a great resource. You might want to check this out. They're interactive map here. You can get all of this information. So these are all the wells, and then these are the lateral lines. So you can see now, that's our little site, and this is our lateral lines where they are blasting out fluids and fracturing and generating gas from these sites. Let's go out just a little bit bigger. Yeah. So that's what's happening in that area. That's our little site. Where I can't even find it now. So this is the point. None of my colleagues knew about what was going on around them all over the place. They could see the well, the rigs and everything, but knowledge of these lateral lines just until the last couple of years, none of my colleagues was aware that this was going on around this site. And there's actually been some changes in groundwater flow out there because of it. Okay, what else should we know? Well, it's not just fracturing or fracking. There's drilling. There's compressor stations. There's all of the infrastructure. The releases from all of this infrastructure, you can read this. These things are they're hazardous chemicals being released at toxic concentrations. They're not, so the release permits, each time you write up a permit to drill a well, you have to have the emissions permit. And it's basically how much material, VOCs, how much of this stuff is going to go into the atmosphere over a 1 year period. And that's fine. It's tons and tons of material. But the problem is that those releases are not, consistent over a year. In fact, fracking happens over about a 3 or 4 day period. And during that period, all of that formaldehyde, the material that comes back up out of that well actually goes into the atmosphere. So what happens when you fracture a well? The well, you fracture it, and you've injected all of these chemicals. You've injected 5% of the volume, and it's actually crystalline silica sand, Crystalline silica sand is used as a proppant to hold open those fractures. Now, crystalline silica is the causative agent of silicosis. And so if you calculate out 5% of 10 million gallons, that volume, there's a massive amount of this silica cell. Much of that stays in the formation, lots of it comes back up. When it's fractured, there will be a period of about 3 days to a few weeks where they will flare the well. And so there you'll see these massive flares, and I have some pictures coming up of that in a second. These flares then burn off excess methane, because that's what's being kind of monitored. Methane is a pretty strong greenhouse gas, but it also releases all of these chemicals. And since that crystalline silica doesn't burn very well, that stuff is released into the atmosphere. People living in those areas get what we call a chemical flu. I try to tell people, if you are aware that there's fracking going on and flaring going around in your area, you should evacuate, you should stay upwind, or take shelter in place. There's a couple of good resources for how do you protect yourself when these things happen. The Southwestern Pennsylvania Environmental Health Project, I have links at the end again too, is a great resource for how do you protect your family from the toxins and the chemicals that are in the air. These particles, I'm not too concerned at the well site, or in that location, that those crystalline silica is actually going to give anybody silicosis. You have to have a pretty high dose. But these particles are coated with chemicals. Chemicals that we don't really know what they are. And these chemicals then, because the pieces that are being ejected, some of them are respirable, you breathe this stuff in, it goes into your lungs and resides there for an extended period of time with that crystalline silica scarring the surface of your lung and allowing these chemicals to be directly injected into your bloodstream.
What's the grain size of the silica?
Yeah, I have some pictures. So the size that they use, it's coming up. But they range, they're about 50 microns, but the small particles can be 1 to 2 microns, so there'll be a lot of that silica dust. So these are the common health effects, and you hopefully, since you've heard about hydraulic fracturing, this is what we hear a lot about: bloody noses, rashes, coughing, respiratory, loss of memory, loss of sense of smell, anxiety, and tremors. I've experienced this. I don't have on there the headaches that don't go away. Some of my students experience headaches when we're down sampling, so I've stopped taking students down to the gas fields unless I have respiratory protection for liability reasons and just because I'm a nice guy. But this is what it looks like. So this is a so this is a couple different like infrastructure facilities. This is a valving station. This stuff right here, this was actually a frame that I grabbed from a video that a friend of mine down in near Pittsburgh sent me. This material was blasting off out of there, and she took a video of this, and I was going to play it, but we'll save it. And this stuff was across the field, and then it came across the field, and in the video she goes, "It's coming this way," and then they had the door open, and it came right into their house, ending up with rashes all over my friend's face. Her son suffered. They've since moved. Her son suffered from nosebleeds. It's just a terrible thing. It's just a terrible thing that happened to that family. This is one of the facilities that is used to fractionate the gas. So in our area of West Virginia, especially, there's what they call wet gas. So it's high BTU gas. It's methane, but it also has propane and butane. And these facilities then fractionate these cryogenic fractionation facilities, and then you can ship the different products to different locations. This particular well, or this particular site down in Houston, Pennsylvania, evacuated, we evacuated a guy down there, Joe Giovannini, and because of his health, he had sealed up his home, like cemented all of his windows shut. It was a big masonry home, and I have images of that if you want to look at it sometime. He sealed himself in his home, but it was when we went down to visit him, that's when all of my students and I became sick, and we helped to get him out of that, and he has since passed on because of his illnesses. This is a friend of mine that lives down in Ray, Pennsylvania, and she had all of these skin lesions and things that just would not go away. There's a pad two pads that are about 1,000 feet from our home, and compressor stations up on the hill, and lots of infrastructure being built around this little community down there. And this stuff, not only did it mess with her, but her father, her mother, her two nieces, her father has passed away, and everyone else in the family is sick. Yeah, these are just not. Why does that do that? Let's see if I can get it back. Oops. Okay. This is a boy that I met down in West Virginia. Oh no, this is Greene County, Pennsylvania. That's his underarm. That little sore would not go away. They hammered that thing with every type of antibiotic, and it eventually did go away. We have not identified what was causing this, but it was on him and his brother. This young man also suffered from a condition where he would like clench up, like when he's going to sleep, he would clench up and like this, like a neurological disorder. When he was tired, his face, he developed face tics. We have videos of this, and neurologists said we've heard about those types of things, but we've actually never seen something like this. The man that's just lives beside him, everybody down the road, they're suffering from very similar conditions, and our doctors in the Concerned Health Professional of New York and the Southwestern Pennsylvania Environmental Health Project are doing what they can to help these people, but it's really beyond our control. This is a rash developed by one of my truck driver friends. This is from a young girl, I think 14 years old, out in North Dakota, that lives by areas. This is an old lady that I met. She wouldn't she wouldn't want me to tell her she's old, but this beautiful woman has been diagnosed with 5 different types of psoriasis, but so does her neighbors up the road, and it's just a ridiculous claim. I mean, it's obvious what's going on. Past her house is the roadway that leads up to one of the disposal sites, and the dust that comes off of the road, you can imagine these trucks are driving in the materials that they are hauling around, and it gets on their tires, and the tires are out, it goes on the road, and then you have fine particulates that goes into people's homes. We have not evacuated these people yet, but they have a granddaughter, and Okay, so here are the links to some of the things that you want to, with information. The Concerned Health Professionals of New York, this is part of the group that I am very thankful to be part of. This is just a great group of folks that have written now we're on the 4th edition of the Compendium of Health Impacts from Hydraulic Fracturing. Physicians, scientists, and engineers for healthy energy. This is up near Ithaca, Cornell, basically. But this group has a list of all the peer-reviewed publications, reports, and research and resources. I want to tell you also that, you guys know how like long science takes sometimes. You have to get funding, write a proposal. First have an idea, write a proposal, conduct the research, write the paper, get it peer-reviewed, get it published. Yeah, it takes a little while. But so in 2015, now I think, and now in 2016, there are over 800 peer-reviewed publications on the health impacts of hydraulic fracturing and related activities, and 80% of those publications were published in 2015. So we have exponentially increased production of credible peer-reviewed science. The science that appears in literature prior to that was largely funded by the industry, and it has a certain bias to it. Yeah, that's what I'll say. And then the list of the harmed. The list of the harmed was a site that was started by a friend of mine, a grandmother and her daughter, and they have now listed over 16,000 incidences of health impacts from hydraulic fracturing. So you can go to this site as well, and if you can imagine, this grandmother and her daughter writing down 16,000 incident reports, it's really remarkable. So what else do we know? Well, it is only part of a rapidly developing process. There's infrastructure, let's just say pipelines, compressor stations, fractionation facilities, landfills, chemical supply chain, to get the stuff there and produce all this crazy these compounds that are used. It is a systems engineering marvel. So, I want to show you a little bit more. How many of you have heard about that leaking gas well out in Alyssa Canyon, Porter Ranch? Yeah? A couple people? So, I want to show you some of the things that we've taken down in West Virginia, because we really should be aware of the amount of methane that's going into our atmosphere. I mean, the best climate models can only do what what they can do if they have the appropriate data sets. But I can tell you that not all of the data have been entered. So here's one. Let's see how this works. This is one that we took with a FLIR camera. They really don't need to shake it. So that's an abandoned well.
You guys ready?
And the FLIR is a camera that you can actually use, you can see reduction gases.
Yeah, see it pretty good. Yeah, go shake it.
So this is an abandoned wellhead. Actually, it was a producing well, but when they pressurized the system down there, it blew this wellhead apart.
Hold it to the back of the casing a little bit so it comes out the front. Yeah, it comes right up the front.
And that's my girlfriend.
Unbelievable. Now, if we stuck a bag over that, we can get a plastic bag and see how fast that fills up. We know what the flow rate would be in there.
Yeah. And that's what we did. Check this out. So these are not being monitored. There's a group from Princeton right now that are down in the fields measuring, quantifying these escaping gases from these facilities. So all we did here was we just put a bag over it, like we said. You can't see anything. I almost passed out right there because these things are terrible. I mean, the smells that are coming. They include mercaptans in gas. So it's like an odorant. When you have natural gas, you don't need any odorant in this stuff. This is basically unrefined gas. It hasn't been processed. West Virginia right now is producing so much gas that it doesn't have the infrastructure in place to actually ship it out, and so it's being injected into these storage fields. Now these things are 30,000 acres, typically 30,000 acres on the surface. They can be a half-mile deep, and they're old abandoned production fields that are now being used for storage. And watch when we take this bag off. So none of this, until the work that the Princeton folks are doing, none of this is actually being quantified. This is 30,000 acres. We have 30 of these fields in West Virginia. Each one of these fields has, we think about somewhere between 1,000 and 5,000 legacy wells on it. But these legacy wells go back way before we had to start documenting and writing permits and stuff like that. So we don't really know exactly how many holes are in the ground right now and emitting these gases.
Would they go in the future and pull that back like the oil stuff on the Gulf Coast?
So the question was?
In the future, would they go and pull the gas back, or is it just stored there?
Oh no! Oh yeah. The question is, so these gas storage fields, what do you do with them when you fill them up? Yeah, they use them as reservoirs, so that they do extract them. In fact, those were old production fields. West Virginia's drilled holes into the ground, and actually all the homes in this area have free gas. It comes with the deed in your home. You can burn it. Actually, the older people are there. When you go into their house, it's like 80 or 90 degrees in there. I mean, they run all of the gas stoves. Yes. Oh, I thought you were asking a question. So these are old legacy wells, and they could pull them out, but they were operating at about 150 to 200 psi. The pressure now in the field is somewhere about 800 psi because they've overpressurized these systems, and that's why they have failure of a lot of the old infrastructure. And then for those of you that haven't seen this one, I'll just show one of these. And I don't want to go too long. Oh, I'm going way long. Okay, let's see if we can get this. So this is just an aerial view.
New footage released by the Environmental Defense Fund offers the first bird's-eye infrared view of the natural gas leak at the Aliso Canyon storage facility owned by Southern California Gas Company. The leak, which has been going on since October, is invisible to the naked eye. It's disrupting life in nearby parts of Los Angeles and the San Fernando Valley, and pumping 62 million cubic feet of methane into the atmosphere each day.
Yeah, this went off in October, and I think it ran until March.
Methane, the main ingredient in natural gas, has over 80 times the warming power of carbon dioxide over a 20-year time frame. EDF estimates the daily near-term climate damage caused by the Aliso Canyon leak is equal to the emissions of 7 million cars. The video was filmed by a specialist using an infrared camera called a FLIR. Leaks this size are rare, but major leakage across the oil and gas supply chain is not, and it adds up to a big climate problem, not just in California, but across the country.
So we'll hold on. So that's what we're dealing with. I mean, it is, and I won't show the last one. We're just going to continue on because we're getting a little late, and I do want to leave time for questions. I have battery. Okay. Done. I'm going to go the old-fashioned way. All right. Well disposal and earthquakes. So this is part of the other, issues that we really have to deal with. I've already talked about the waste disposal. Now, the waste disposal can be referred to the drill cuttings. It can refer to flowback, which is a lot of that is cleaned up and then reused or re-injected. So flowback is something that comes up right after you frack a well. But produced water is the fluids, and again, I don't use the term water with any of these. These fluids, the produce fluids, have extended contact time with the formation and extract a lot of material from those formations, including high concentrations of bromide, which is actually impacting water quality. So that now in southwestern Pennsylvania, chloramine is being used as a disinfectant because the bromide levels are so high that they are making these trihalomethanes that are really problematic. But let's get those. So those materials, those produce waters, are the fluids that are injected into waste disposal. And these waste disposal wells are principally the wells that are responsible for the earthquakes, the increase in earthquakes. And I should be talking about this while we're watching this. This is a remarkable thing that I just ran across. And this is just a visual of the earthquakes in Oklahoma from 2005 to 2014. It didn't even get to 2016. And so these are caused, the big ones, are caused by the injections of these fluids. And these injection wells then will cause or form hydraulic layers underneath or between formations and cause releases. You get the idea where we're going here. Let me just speed it up a little bit so we can get to the juicy.
Those are actually wells.
These are earthquakes.
I mean, earthquakes that we're here.
Yeah, and the intensity is the size. I like it, yeah. But watch what happens when they start. Okay, so remember we started really doing this big stuff around 2012, 2013. And then, for a while, they actually stopped, and there was a brief period after that big one went off because they were reviewing this. That was only the 2000. Did they go to 2014? The stuff that there was 897 earthquakes above 3.0 or 3.2 in Oklahoma last year. That accounts for more earthquakes than any of the other 49 states. So there may be a correlation between these injection wells and these swarms of earthquakes. In fact, it's well published now that those injection wells were the cause of those 3.2 or higher in Oklahoma, and that was published by the U.S. Geological Survey, both at the national level and also at the state level. So there's no controversy about that. Okay, so there's a bunch of literature. All of the literature can be found in those on this. I didn't want to make this a science talk because I knew that there were some folks in the audience that weren't scientists, but if you really want to go to the primary literature, like things like this can all be located at the PSE for Healthy Energy, the physicians, scientists, and engineers for Healthy Energy. They have a list of all of these. It's a great resource, and I suggest that you go there. Now, I just want to show you at the end, because, this is not something that just, environmentalists or activists are involved in. There are legitimate scientists and medical professionals that have really stepped up to help to raise awareness and to call BS on what's going on. Dr. David Brown, he used to work for the CDC, I think in the asthma group. He was the director of the asthma group, but he started the Southwestern PA Environmental Health Project, and you can just read what he has to say there. Okay, so he does, refer to Josh Fox's films, because Josh is an activist, but these are advocates. These scientists, engineers, health professionals, we advocate for healthy, like clean water, like safe drinking water, clean air, and to know what's happening. We're trying to help to raise awareness of the general public, not through activism, but through advocacy. And here's another one. This Michelle Bamberger is a veterinarian. She published a book just recently because animals are really sentinels for human health impacts, but they don't factor into any human health impact studies. But these animals are out in your fields, they're eating the grass, most of the people that live down in the frack fields have problems with, especially their cats. Cats will die pretty readily if you have any fracking or flaring going on, because they're always walking around and licking their hands and preening. And so Michelle has traveled down to these areas and has documented not only animal impacts, but also she has contributed to the case studies for human health impacts. And then there is just this last one. And these, I have to say that, there is one bright side in all of this, is that I've met some remarkable people in the last 4 or 5 years. And although I haven't met John, he lives in an area in New South Wales that is being fracked for coal seam methane. And you might go on and look up the Condamine River, because it's on fire now. And actually one of the MPs down there set it on fire and almost blew himself out of the boat when he torched it off. So it's a really great view. But John was there too. And the problem that I have here is that, a lot of these families have children. And these children are going to have longer lives. They have a lot ahead of them. And the health impacts for children are higher for lots of reasons. They're smaller, their respiration rate is higher, they're biosynthesizing, they're growing. They're closer to the ground. And so most of these, my concerns right now are the health impacts of the children in these areas. So anyway, I just wanted to discuss that. And I think that, the bottom line here is that there is enough information available. I mean, absolutely sufficient information to put an immediate moratorium, at the very least, on further development of unconventional resources like shale gas and oil. The information about the health impacts did make it to the governor of New York State and his health commissioner, and they decided, partially based on that, to ban high-volume hydraulic fracturing from New York State. But I really am quite concerned now that people that are living in these areas, as we go through the process of trying to really not regulate, but actually to stop this, that there will be a lot of people that continue to get sicker and sicker, and especially the children. So a friend of mine, Dorothy Bassett, has just launched the Ararat Project. I'm on the board, and it's a not-for-profit, and what we are trying to do now is to raise funds to help people either relocate or to try to take shelter in place, because we just can't sit by and watch these families. No, I just can't. So do we have options? We have lots of options. In fact, Mark Jacobson from Stanford and some folks from Cornell University, including Tony and Graphia, they work together, I think in Graphia, yeah. And Bob Howarth, these guys use New York State as a model system to show that we can transition off of fossil fuels, or fossil carbon, I don't even call it fuels anymore. We can transition off that to alternative renewables. And in this, they show how that can be done over a period of time. And we're not talking a long period of time, so I encourage going to this. And also look up Mark Jacobson and also the Solutions Project. And I think Mark Ruffalo is the actor that's really helping, the celebrity that's really helping to promote it, although Mark is now becoming a celebrity. They go through basically all 50 states, show, analyze the available energy in wind, geothermal, biomass, and biogas production, and for each of the 50 states, and the time frame it would take to transition off of that. And so this is a really good resource, and I would highly recommend, because we just can't stop fossilized carbon. Because if we stop producing it, the world will go into an economic shock right now. It's like, taking your gas off the accelerator too fast. You're going to cause a ripple effect that will be devastating for global economics and global health. What we need to do is take a metered, rational approach, something that these guys are contributing to, and to gently back off of that and transition. And I'm not saying that this is you'll hear that term. Have any of you heard the term, all of the above? In terms of the energy. That's because that's a psychological tool. Like if we're funding something that is high-end technology for something that is actually a product now that we have overproduced. The pipelines that are coming out of the shale gas fields, they're not taking gas to distribution points. Those big pipelines, the transmission lines, 34-inch to 40-inch lines, those are transmission lines that are going to the coast, and that product is going to be shipped off to foreign markets. So this is not about national energy security, because if it was about national energy security, we keep it in the ground and use it as we need it. We wouldn't be pushing it into storage fields that are blasting into the atmosphere. This is about corporate profit, and those big oil pipelines and gas pipelines are meant to take it to the edges, the margins of our continent, and ship it to foreign markets so that they can have profit. Now, we have a couple of things that we can do as citizens. We can write to Dr. Ernie Moniz at the U.S. Department of Energy. He is the one that has the sole authority to transition import terminals along our coast, like down in Cove Point, Maryland. You guys are aware of that spot. Cove Point is now being transitioned to an export terminal. Are you guys aware of what's happening in Cove Point since it's so close? No one. Yeah. Wow. Yes. So Cove Point, Maryland it has a gas import station, and 14 miles offshore, there's a place where the boats can come in, hook up, and pressurize and send gas inward, and we blast it into the Northeast. That is now has conditional approval by Ernie Moniz for transitioning to an export terminal. So this will go. Facility will go from about a 50-acre facility to a 500-acre facility. There will be 2 huge power stations on there, compressor stations, to pressurize that gas for transport out into these boats. There will be pipelines, train traffic. This is inside. It's up in the Chesapeake. And the company that has the contract for that, you can check it out yourself. I won't go through it, but they have down in the Gulf, they've had explosions down there on these facilities down there. They have a very poor record, and you really want to try to raise your awareness of what's going on in Cove Point, because it will. The impact that it's going to have in the fisheries, for instance, is it's unbelievable. Please find out about that. Write letters to any of your governmental representatives that will listen to you, and especially those that don't listen to you. Send them letters. And send some things to U.S. Department of Energy Secretary Ernie Moniz and implore him not to approve these things. You know that we also, something remarkable has happened to promote corporate profits. So we had the Refineries Act. Do you all know what that is? It's from the 70s. we, the United States, could not ship off crude oil anywhere in the world. And that was to protect our refinery capacity here. So we have refineries on the Gulf Coast, refineries everywhere. Just 4 months ago, they've dispensed with that. So now we can ship raw product, we can, through these pipelines, untreated, offshore, to foreign markets for treatment. That is a major transformation of our energy sector. And again, it does not profit the United States. It does not benefit anybody that lives by these pipelines and compressor stations. I didn't have time, evidently, to go through all of this, but the compressor stations, the emissions from a compressor stations that's running properly is toxic, and you cannot live by one. So please do what you can. I'm not going to talk, in case I can't believe that I even thought that I might not run over, because I always do. But we've just launched a rainwater monitoring project, because you guys have all heard about acid rain, right? Acid rain from all of the sulfur-bearing coal furnaces in the Midwest, in Ohio, and West Virginia. Well, we've kind of taken care of that, but now we have all these big shale gas fields. We have hundreds of thousands of wells that are planned. Each of those are flaring, they have emissions. And so what we're doing right now is actually monitoring the transmission of those emissions from their source to their site of deposition. And that can be New York, New England, DC, and it really is remarkable. I'll send this is in the presentation as well. In the town that I live now, or where I work, in Troy, New York, in 1953, there was an event that basically dosed the whole place with radioactive iodine. That was a problem. That was the big problem, because it's short-lived and not easy to detect. But it just so happens that one of the professors, Herbert Clark at RPI, was part of the Manhattan Project, and when he went into his lab, his students were saying, hey, there's something wrong with our system, all of our Geiger counters, or all of our counters are reading high. And when they checked it out, to make a long story short, yeah, everything was coated with about 1,000 times of background. It was radioactive iodine and strontium, I think, and there was a temporal increase in thyroid, but this was caused by an 11,000-pound bomb named Simon that was exploded over the Nevada desert, about 300 feet, and the plume went up to 40,000 feet plus, and that 40,000-foot section came right over and rained down in this downpour in Troy, New York, and dosed us. And that was the first real knowledge, public knowledge, that you could have transfer of this material into the public systems. Actually, it's not the first, but this is when it really was noted by a scientist. And so check that out as well. So that's what we're checking on now. It's not only people living in these fields, and it's not only global climate change, but those little particles. Remember, those little silica particles coated with these chemicals that are endocrine disrupting compounds can transfer with weather patterns. So we're correlating it with weather patterns, and this is through the Questar program that funds high school teachers to work in laboratories like mine. And Guardian Hunter is then going to correlate weather maps and weather information with the samples that we'll be collecting from rainwater samples. And hopefully we'll be able to identify the crystalline silica, which I did not show yet. Oh yeah, so this is what the crystalline silica looks like on the ground after they do this. So this is that's what a flare looks like. And then this material not only has the emissions, but it also has this sand that accumulates everywhere. Collect some of that stuff. And not only can you identify this just by the silica signature, but the coatings on this now we're attempting to extract and identify chemicals that are present on these little particles. And so you see there's a pretty wide range of sizes here. And so I think that that's about it for now, because yeah, this is our advanced sampling gear. But it is, these endocrine disrupting compounds are something of concern, especially for like fish populations. So entering into primary watersheds, if you have particles that are raining down and entering into a watershed that has that not yet filled, and if those concentration rains then bring these particles, they'll embed those particles, and at the primary sources of the watersheds, you have the potential at least to have impacts on the sex of fish. I think you all know now there's a high proportion of the fish in the Chesapeake Bay have both male and female sexual in the Potomac. So there's a real issue, and we have to raise our awareness just so we can hope to understand what's going on, and then hope to unify it and come up with some sort of response. So I went way over, and but thank you all for like enduring with me, and I would love to take any questions about anything.
So let me go to Larry first, and then I'll go with you second.
I agree with everything you're saying. I think a very, very strong case for all these problems. We're in the middle of a very contentious political season right now.
Yes.
And a lot of the places you're talking about where the people are hurt the most, in West Virginia and southwestern Pennsylvania and Oklahoma, these are places that overwhelmingly vote for the political party that, let's just say, is not in favor of regulating fossil fuel extraction. West Virginia may be full of smart people, but it's gonna like vote Trump 67, or 60 or 70%. I'll bet you. Why? Well, what can you do about it if in a political situation like that?
Well, let me say something about West Virginia. All 55 counties in West Virginia, at least on the Democratic ticket, voted for Bernie Sanders.
Right.
Bernie Sanders is the only candidate that is
but he's
against.
not going to be the nominee.
He's not.
That's irrelevant.
We can say that. We can say that. And you can say that, but I don't say it because those types of things, if I say it, they tend to come true. So I don't say it. But he does do one thing. He brings a discussion, and he will continue that discussion because this type of stuff is way on his radar. Now we may think that the Republicans are in big support of this. Trump doesn't know anything about this yet.
No.
But Hillary Clinton is fully engaged in this and a big supporter of hydraulic fracturing, and so is President Obama. And you can hear it from, go back and look at his inauguration speeches, State of the Union addresses, 12 to 14 minutes devoted to clean energy, not considering cradle to grave, only where it burns. So what do? Look, I have lots of Republican friends, and I, when they look at this, I mean, in fact, I have to say, one of the medical doctors on our thing intends to vote for Trump, and it kind of blew my mind a little bit. And but it's not that type of political issue. This is a human health issue. And so if anybody, Trump, Clinton, Sanders, doesn't matter. If they're in favor of this, we should be at least against them, against their position. Like, pointed to them. If you want to have Hillary Clinton to be nominated, have her say, I do not support hydraulic fracture. Have her say that.
Well, let me ask you this. If in some of these districts where this is going on, if they also vote overwhelmingly for Republican congressmen, if a Democratic candidate came in there and their main issue was anti-fracking, would they get elected in these counties or in these districts?
I think that if they would, there should be a condition that they are to move to where these poor people live, by these facilities, because none of those politicians live by these things.
Okay.
Did I miss the question?
I think so, but there's
I'm
probably
sorry.
other questions.
I'm sorry. I'd love to talk with you about
Yeah.
that stuff. Yeah.
So I agree with much of what you said, but I don't think fracking is going away. So is there an effort to figure out how to make it safe or safer?
You can't regulate safety, no. And then, so yeah, one of the things, 15% of the whales, 5% of the wells fail upon completion, 5%. So we're planning about 100,000 wells in the Marcellus, so that's a big number. 15%, I mean, within 15 years, we can have up to 50% failure rates in these things. So eventually, these legacy wells, which by the way, my driller friend now, he's not drilling anymore, he's plugging these old legacy wells because they're the ones that are venting out of there. The high volume wells, you have to plug that whole pay zone. You have to kill that whole well. So it's not going to be possible to actually, like, stop that. I mean, with time, those wells are going to fail, and they're going to be emitting gases, and we will not. It takes about, he said it's going to take somewhere between $100,000 to $500,000 to kill a well. So we have, 100,000 of these. It's just not going to In terms of like, mentioning that this is like, again, hydraulic fracturing, or we're not going to stop fracking. Other countries have stopped it. France has banned it. Germany has banned it. We can ban this. I mean, we can. We have the means to do this. This is not I mean, we have a democratic society, at least we're supposed to. So I think that we have a possibility if we all raise our awareness and have our voices heard. So that,
But I think that's wishful thinking in some ways. You need to find an intermediate solution. I mean, who is financially liable, making people companies financially liable for leaking wells, or pollution or medical problems, and force them to come up with solutions. And unless you can do that, I don't think people are going to take you 100% seriously.
well, you can look at the stock portfolios of most of the companies. I mean, Chesapeake has nearly gone bankrupt, so all of the wells that they drilled around West Virginia, they have transferred those leases to someone else, I think Total or one of these other groups. So there is a financial losses that are happening right now. I mean, again, if you're invested or in any of these technology, you should just go and check your stocks because they're probably dropping.
That's because the gas prices are going down.
It is gas prices, yeah. So why do we continue to drill then? That's the question. Why do we continue to drill when you're not making any profit on this material? It's because you have to keep that up to keep the machine running. And so there's even economic reasons to divert those investments. What is the solution? This cannot be done more safely. You can have a perfect well, and there are demonstration wells on university campuses that were, actually the ones, most university campuses currently are vertical wells, demonstration wells. They're not the big horizontal wells, not the big pay wells. And so you can do that type of stuff and convince people that it can be done safely, but then again, you have to look at the legacy wells. And so no, there is no way to regulate safety in this area or do it properly.
So related to that, though, is the question of the renewables. When you said that people were talking about how long it takes us, what's that time scale?
Yeah, so I don't have the numbers in there, but they were 2040, I think, is what they did for New York. It's in the publication. I'm sorry, it's not. Yeah, I mean, it would be like 15 years, 15 to 20 year time. And again, we don't, the material that we're using, we have so much of it that we're pushing it into facilities that are venting into the atmosphere. So there is reason to slow down and let things catch up. Well, go ahead, you got it.
Todd and then Steven.
You said we're exporting a lot of it also now?
Well, the bomb trains coming from North Dakota right now are carrying the light crude, and those are going to offshore. Yeah, all of the trains are.
I'm curious, is there a main country we export to? Or?
Yes, I think that the one from Cove Point, that's basically going to France, I think, but it is Europe. It's a European market. The ones that are trying to push on the West Coast, that's to Korea. It's a lot for the steel production out there. So that's where we're making a lot of the steel for the pipelines is being produced in Korea. And so a lot of the gas is going there so that they can produce steel so they can ship it back here. Yeah. That's part of the systems engineering approach.
Yeah, I know the widening the Panama Canal to allow these bigger gas export ships.
Yeah, the big ball, the big.
Well, my question is this. I'm struck by the similarity of leukemia cases around nuclear installations. There was a big argument through the late 70s, 80s and 90s, and it was never really resolved. What is the EPA and NIH doing about this, which are the government bodies that should be taking this up and studying it in minute detail at this point? I mean, legislatively speaking, that's the job. So what are they doing?
And so you're speaking about like the EPA's role right now with hydraulic fracturing, the stuff that we're talking about here. So they did release a draft report, I think it was about 6 months ago, about hydraulic fracturing and its potential to contaminate groundwater. This was focused on groundwater. And their conclusion was that there is not widespread contamination. Like hydraulic fracturing does not cause widespread contamination of groundwater. The Independent Scientific Review Board came back to them and said that that's not correct. I mean, you have to readjust, not just that, but there was a whole response. So what I'm going to say is that Gina McCarthy, the administrator for the EPA, supports hydraulic fracturing. In fact, when she was appointed by President Obama, she dismissed the three high-profile cases. This one was in Dimmick, Pennsylvania, Pavilion, Wyoming, and Denton, Texas. Dismissed them. This is already after the companies had agreed to provide water to these homes and everything. That was thrown out. When they were thrown out, that scientific review board came back and said, "You get those back in the books. We want to know everything about it." So I do applaud the scientific advisory board for the EPA for doing their job and keeping them in line. But that's ongoing now. So check it out at the EPA with the SAB.
So why isn't it a good first step to have them follow the Clean Water Act and Clean Air Act? You said at the beginning of your talk that basically Obama administration allowed them to violate those
Actually,
statutes.
Yeah, the 2005 energy policy, that was from the Cheney administration.
Okay.
I mean, so
I gather from the date it was not,
yeah, it's the Halliburton loophole. That's what that whole thing is about, and Obama
why
allowed
not start
that.
there? We have law on the books, and why not start there?
That's the first thing that we called for. Actually, I didn't because I wasn't aware of it. But it's like repeal the 2005 Energy Policy Act, at least those exemptions, and let's have a discussion then. That's exactly the point. Why are those exemptions there? Who wrote them? Why? What was the justification for? Did you know that these things were toxic or hazardous to people? Yeah, that's why.
Why not see if the industry could then clean itself up to the point where it would at least mitigate some of them?
There's an approach. So there would be an approach. Remove those the exemptions and put regulators on there. I mean, sufficient regulators. We have to hire more people to go around and
if you want to write a congressman, this is what you would. This is a practical solution that is the first step.
Yeah, I think that's yeah. So that would be a great thing to write into your representatives. Just ask for the repeal of the 2005 Energy Policy Act exemptions, and then we could actually have the EPA do their job. Right now, the EPA has no control over hydraulic fracturing. The control has been given to the state, and so the states then, the governments, like in West Virginia, they're all great people down there in Charleston. They are really supportive of the industry because of the promise of wealth, not only for the state, but also to them personally. Yeah,
first 13 years of my life, I grew up in Pittsburgh area, just south of Pittsburgh, with steel mills going and all the smoke.